Once in a quiet village nestled between vast mountains and sprawling fields, there lived a poor man named Ahmed. He was known throughout the village for his honesty, humility, and unwavering faith in Allah. Though he had little in terms of material wealth, his heart was rich with kindness and patience. Ahmed earned a modest living by mending shoes and doing small chores for the villagers, often accepting whatever people could spare as payment, even if it was only a piece of bread or a kind word. In the same village, there lived a young girl named Amina. She was the daughter of a wealthy merchant and had been brought up in comfort and abundance. Her family owned large lands and several shops, and they never knew the pain of hunger or the weight of poverty. But unlike many others who lived in privilege, Amina was humble and soft-hearted. Her father had taught her from a young age to care for the poor and to always be grateful for Allah's blessings. One cold winter morning, Amina passed by the village square and noticed Ahmed sitting on a stone bench, repairing a torn sandal with numb fingers. She paused for a moment and observed the deep lines on his face, the cracked skin of his hands, and the worn-out clothes he wore. A gentle wind blew, making Ahmed shiver slightly, but he kept working silently. Moved by compassion, Amina approached him and asked, "Uncle Ahmed, are you cold? Do you need anything?" Ahmed smiled warmly despite his situation and said, "No, my dear child, I have all that I need. Alhamdulillah, Allah provides for me." Her heart ached at his humility. That evening, Amina went home and asked her father if she could use some of her allowance to help Ahmed. Her father, impressed by her concern, gave her more than she asked. The next morning, she returned to Ahmed with a warm coat, some food, and a small pouch of coins. Ahmed was surprised and deeply touched. With tears in his eyes, he said, "May Allah bless you, child. But please, tell me why you are doing this." Amina replied, "You are our neighbor, and you are in need. The Prophet Muhammad taught us to care for one another and to love for our brother what we love for ourselves." Ahmed took the gifts and raised his hands to the sky, praying for Amina and her family. He said, "Why, Allah, bless this child and grant her a heart that always stays close to you." Years passed, and the village slowly began to change. Amina grew into a wise and generous young woman, loved by all for her compassion and grace. Her deeds inspired others in the village to care more for the poor. Meanwhile, Ahmed, now older and frailer, continued to live a simple life, always remembering the kindness of a little girl who reminded him that wealth does not lie in gold or silver, but in a heart full of faith and generosity. When Ahmed passed away, the whole village came to honor him. Amina, with tears in her eyes, remembered his words, his smile, and the strength of his faith. She carried his lessons with her for the rest of her life. The story of Ahmed and Amina spread beyond the village, inspiring others to give, to care, and to trust in Allah's mercy. It served as a timeless reminder that small acts of kindness, done with sincerity and faith, can change lives and leave a lasting legacy. The moral of this story is that wealth does not define a person's worth. True richness lies in faith, patience, and compassion. Islam teaches us to care for one another, to give without expecting, and to always be grateful for what we have. A single act of kindness can echo through generations and become a light in someone's darkest hour. Amina continued to grow in both wisdom and character. The values that Ahmed had exemplified, contentment, faith, and humility, were etched into her heart. As she grew older, she dedicated more of her life to serving those in need. She started a small school for orphan children in the village, ensuring they received not only education but also love and guidance. She would often tell them the story of the poor cobbler, Ahmed, who was richer in faith than many kings in gold. Whenever the children complained or felt sad, Amina would remind them of how Ahmed never let hardship weaken his spirit. "He smiled even in hunger," she would say, "and when the world offered him little, he still praised Allah with a full heart." Through her words, the memory of Ahmed lived on. One night, Amina had a dream. In it, she saw a bright garden filled with light, where Ahmed sat under a tree, peaceful and smiling. He looked young and strong, his clothes shining with light. When he saw Amina, he stood and said, "You helped me when I was cold, you fed me when I was hungry, and you remembered me in your prayers. Allah never forgets those who give for his sake. Your reward is written with him." Amina woke up with tears on her face and a heart full of peace. She knew that Allah had accepted her efforts and that Ahmed was resting in Jannah, the paradise promised to the righteous. That dream gave her even more strength to continue her mission. As the years passed, Amina's reputation spread far and wide. People from nearby towns came to her for advice, comfort, and guidance. Yet she never sought fame or reward. She would always say, "I only try to do what pleases Allah. This world is temporary, but what we do in it will echo in the next." Eventually, Amina became old, her hair gray, her steps slower, but her spirit remained strong. Before her passing, she gathered the children of the village, many now grown with children of their own, and told them, "Never forget the value of one good deed. Never pass a poor man without kindness. What we give for the sake of Allah never truly leaves us." When Amina died, the entire village mourned. The school she founded was renamed Madrasat Ahmed W.A. Amina, the School of Ahmed and Amina, to honor the legacy of compassion, faith, and service that started with one poor man and a young girl's caring heart. Their story remained a guiding light in the village for generations. Parents told their children, teachers told their students, and even travelers carried the tale beyond the mountains, reminding the world that even in the smallest village, the greatest of hearts can be found. Indeed, Islam teaches us that no act of kindness is ever wasted, and the sincerest faith can shine even in the humblest of lives. The bond between Ahmed and Amina was not one of wealth or status, but of love for Allah and service to his creation. And such bonds, forged in faith, are everlasting. Years passed, and the Madrasat Ahmed W.A. Amina stood as a beacon of light in the region. Students who graduated from the school carried its values wherever they went, into cities, other villages, and even across borders. Many of them became scholars, teachers, and community leaders, always speaking of the village where a poor man's patience and a young girl's compassion had planted the seeds of their success. One of Amina's students, Yusuf, was particularly inspired. He had been orphaned at a young age and taken in by the school. He remembered Amina's gentle words, her way of teaching through stories and quiet example. Yusuf eventually became an Islamic scholar and returned to the village as the school's new head. With him, he brought new books, new methods of teaching, and new students, but he never changed the foundation, the morals of kindness, humility, and trust in Allah. Every year, on the anniversary of Ahmed's death, the village held a gathering. People of all ages would come together in the courtyard of the school. They recited Qur'an, made dua for the deceased, and, if you ever wonder if your kindness matters, remember Ahmed, who had only broken shoes and worn out hands, but gave his gratitude. Remember Amina, who was young and unseen, but gave her heart. And remember that Allah never overlooks a single sincere act, no matter how small. The world may forget names, but Jannah remembers sincerity. And so the story, quiet, humble, eternal, goes on, passed from hand to hand, from heart to heart, whispered on the lips of those who seek to live not just for this world, but for the next. May we all be among them. Ameen. Shared stories of how the legacy of Ahmed and Amina had touched their lives. It became a sacred tradition, one that reminded everyone that goodness never dies. It simply passes from heart to heart. One rainy evening, a traveler arrived in the village. He had heard of the school and its history, and came seeking guidance. He was tired, confused, and looking for meaning in his life. Yusuf welcomed him, gave him shelter, and sat with him under the same tree where Amina used to sit and teach. After hearing the story of Ahmed and Amina, the traveler wept and said, "I have searched far and wide for peace, but I found it here in the story of two people who served Allah quietly and sincerely." And so, the legacy continued, not through monuments or riches, but through the transformation of hearts. The village prospered, not with worldly luxury, but with spiritual richness. No one was left hungry, no one was forgotten, and everyone found comfort in the shared belief that serving others was a form of worship. Children were taught that a warm smile, a shared meal, and a sincere prayer could be more valuable than gold. They were taught, above all, that no one is too poor to give, and no one is too young to change the world. The story of Ahmed and Amina became more than a memory. It became a living example of what Islam truly teaches: Rahmah, mercy, ikhlas, sincerity, and tawakkul, trust in Allah. And as long as their story was told, their light would never fade. In every heart that chose kindness over cruelty, in every hand that reached out to help another, and in every soul that said Alhamdulillah even in hardship, their legacy lived on. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are not written in books, but written in the lives we touch, with faith, love, and sincerity. Many years later, long after both Ahmed and Amina had returned to their Lord, the story of their lives had taken root in the hearts of countless people. The village that was once small and quiet had grown, but its soul remained the same. New homes were built, roads were paved, and the school had become a renowned center of learning, not because of wealth or fame, but because of its foundation, a story of sincerity. Travelers would come not just to learn, but to witness a place where Islamic values were lived, not just taught. They would hear children recite Quran, then go into the streets to give food to the poor. They would see shopkeepers closing early on Fridays, not for rest, but to serve free meals to those in need. They would see neighbors praying for each other, helping each other, and greeting one another with true warmth. One particular student, a young girl named Hafsa, found herself especially drawn to Amina's life. She would spend hours reading the old journal entries that Amina had written, preserved by Yusuf and the generations after him. In those pages, Amina had written, "We are not remembered by how much we own, but by how we make others feel. Kindness is a language that even the heart understands. I was only a girl when I helped Ahmed, but he taught me more about life than any book ever could. He taught me how to be content with little and grateful for everything. May Allah accept his patience and make my actions sincere." Hafsa was deeply moved by these words and made a vow, "I will continue what they started." She began organizing small service projects in the village, distributing blankets in winter, collecting books for children, and visiting the elderly. What began as small efforts grew into a youth group called the Light of Sincerity. And once again, the story continued, not through fame or speeches, but through quiet, faithful action. Eventually, Hafsa wrote a book titled The Story of Ahmed and Amina, A Legacy of Faith. It was published and read around the world. The story, born from a poor man's resilience and a young girl's compassion, now reached places and hearts they had never seen. Mosques held story nights where children listened wide-eyed, tears in their eyes, as they heard about a cobbler who trusted Allah and a girl who turned kindness into a legacy. And yet, the most beautiful part of the story was not in how far it spread, but in how deeply it was felt. It reminded people that greatness does not lie in being seen, but in being sincere. That faith is not in words alone, but in actions done quietly for the sake of Allah. That even a single piece of bread shared, or a coat given on a cold day, could become the reason for someone's Jannah. In the end, the story of Ahmed and Amina proved what the Prophet Muhammad said: the most beloved people to Allah are those who are most beneficial to others, and that sometimes the most powerful dawah comes not from the pulpit, but from the heart of a poor man and the hand of a kind young girl. May Allah have mercy on them both, and may their story continue to light the hearts of believers until the end of time. Ameen. As the years passed, the Light of Sincerity continued to flourish, and Hafsa's book became a beloved classic in homes, schools, and masjids around the world. Generations came and went, but the message stayed timeless, etched into the soul of every heart it touched. One day, a boy named Umar, barely 10 years old, sat beneath the same tree where Amina once sat with children gathered around her. The tree had grown tall and wide over the decades, its branches reaching toward the sky like hands raised in dua. Umar was listening to his grandfather read aloud from Hafsa's book. When the story finished, the boy looked up and asked, "Grandfather, do you think I can be like Amina? Can I do something that matters to?" The old man smiled, his eyes glistening with wisdom and memories. He placed his hand gently on Umar's head and said, "My dear boy, Amina didn't wait to become important before she helped someone. She saw a man who needed kindness, and she gave it. That's how it starts. You don't need to be big to do something great. You only need a sincere heart and a love for Allah." That night, inspired by the story he had heard so many times, Umar took his small savings, just a few coins, and bought bread from the village bakery. He gave it to an elderly neighbor who had no family left. She smiled, tears welling in her eyes, and made dua for him. It was a simple gesture, unnoticed by most, but written and remembered by the one who sees all. And so, the circle continued. That's the beauty of sincere deeds. They ripple outward in silence. They inspire without demanding attention. They travel across time, touching people the door may never meet in this life, but who will recognize them in the hereafter. The village had changed much, but its heart remained the same. It stood as proof that when something is built on taqwa, God consciousness, it lasts. The school, the youth group, the traditions of charity and service, all of it carried the fingerprints of Ahmed's patience and Amina's kindness. And though their graves lay quiet beneath the earth, their story lived in the winds, in the footsteps of the children who ran through the village, in every salam spoken with warmth, and every meal shared in love. Perhaps the most powerful lesson their lives taught was this: you don't need to have much to give everything. And when you give for Allah, nothing is ever lost. In the final chapter of Hafsa's book, she wrote,